Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this month's Masterclass. I'm Michaela, and today we're going to be talking all about something that has been on my mind a lot lately. So, finding your voice when it matters most. And for those of you that are new to us, I'm Michaela Rini, and I'm the founder of an organization called Opportunity Global. And I also run a TEDx event in Teesside in the northeast of England. And we've been developing human skills with the same rigor as technical skills, because I think they need that, for over a decade now, and working with over 10,000 leaders who've been promoted, often without the support they need to be successful in those roles. So we don't do soft skills training. We're actually on a mission to ban that phrase, because I think it really undervalues the importance and the power of human skills. So we create really practical programs for culture transformation and building teams that actually work really well together. And now I know some of you will be thinking, oh, here we go. It's another leadership chat about speaking up. But this isn't about courage. This isn't about finding your authentic self or using your voice in the context of public speaking. Instead, today's session is going to be about the real messy and uncomfortable reality of leading when the world feels a little bit out of kilter, a little bit like it's falling around at times around us. So how do we best help and show up for our teams in these more challenging times? Because they're the times that really make or break a team, a culture, and how they work together. So let's dive into what we're chatting about today. I'm just going to move that slide along and we'll get started. So why does this matter at the moment? Why am I even talking about it? So for me right now, whether you want them to or not, your team is processing every single day when they're at work what's happening in the world around us right now. They're seeing their news, they're maybe doom scrolling before they hit their desk in the morning, and they're hearing about the conflicts, the crises, the division, the noise, and everything that is happening around them in the world during even their lunch break. And they're really looking to you as the leader of their team, of their organization, for guidance and for support. So we're not expecting you to fix everything, because let's be really honest, none of us can probably have the power to do that right now. But we all absolutely have the ability to support our teams in a really positive, compassionate, and very real way. So it's important that as a leader, as a manager, as a contributor in our workplaces, in our communities, that we don't just talk about this stuff, but we actually acknowledge how real everything that is going on in the world right now is for people and how much it is affecting people. Because silence in this scenario, I don't think that's neutral. Silence never is neutral, right? Silence is still a choice. And when you choose silence, your team notices that. They will make assumptions based on that silence. They will perhaps be talking about things in their teams, in their lunch breaks. And what you really want to do as a leader is ensure that you're having the uncomfortable conversations, so that any challenges people are facing, any personal effects that they might be having, is really surfaced, and you can support them through those situations, so that as a team you can be much more high performing, productive, but in a way that's compassionate and empathetic to whatever individual circumstances people might be experiencing. Because remember, there is a lot of research out there that our managers and leaders in our workplaces, they actually have more of an effect on an individual's mental health than a doctor or a therapist can. So just think about that for a minute. There is a lot of pressure actually on our managers and leaders to make sure that we're showing up in a way that is really supportive of our teams. So we're going to just touch on that a little bit in our masterclass today. Okay, so let's get started. So let's just be real for a minute about what's actually happening in our workplaces, in our communities right now. So as I said before, like whether you want them to or not, or whether that's causing distraction at times in the workplace, your team is already having these conversations. So whether that's at lunch, while they're making a cuppa, while they're in the corridor after meetings, they're talking about what they're seeing in the world right now. They're talking about how it's affecting them, what they think about the leadership that they're witnessing on a global stage, and how it's having an impact on them at an individual level, as well as for other people in their community. And the question isn't whether to address this. I think it's how we address this, because pretending that things aren't happening in the world isn't going to make it go away, and it just makes you irrelevant to the conversations that are actually shaping your team's experiences at work. So if you're silent, you're not part of that conversation. You're not part of making their experience even better in the workplace. So I'm going to talk a little bit now just about, what's at stake actually if we don't have these more uncomfortable conversations about things that are going on in the world right now, whether that's politically, whether that's the rise in the far right, whether it's the racism that we're seeing and the sexism that's happening. All of these things are having an impact on your team. Every single member of your team is hearing, witnessing, seeing the news, having conversations, and you really, as a leader, I feel, can use your voice to start having some of these conversations in a more productive and successful way in the workplace. Okay, so we're going to dive into that. So one of the things that I think is at stake, just first and foremost, is team trust. So when you ignore anything that's clearly affecting your people, over time, those people in your team will start to see you as someone who doesn't necessarily care about their whole experience as a human being, but perhaps is only caring about their productivity and how they're showing up in the workplace. And over time, that really starts to erode the trust that you've built as a leader, but also the culture that you're creating in your organization as well. So secondly, it also affects your credibility, really, as a leader who cares, So what do I mean by that? So your credibility, your team needs to know that you see them as human beings, not just as resources, not just as people who can help shape and make the team more productive, more efficient, can get the never-ending to-do list done. But really, you want to be seen as a leader that cares, right? I don't think there's anyone, well, maybe some people on the global stage, but we won't go into that today. This isn't a political broadcast, but certainly people in the workplace, I believe the majority of people are showing up every single day wanting to do a good job, yeah? And as leaders and managers, we should be showing that we care not only about their impact in the workplace and their productivity and their efficiency and the great work they're doing, but we really care about their whole human experience. And it's when we do that, that's the shift change that we see happen in cultures. When everyone in a team is not only caring about each other, but we're challenging each other as well. This isn't about being nice. This is about challenging, caring, and ensuring that your team really can be set up for success in their workplace and that they can feel good while they're doing it. So the third part for me is the culture that you're creating. That's what's at stake. If we don't have these conversations, if we don't use our voices as leaders and managers in our workplace and have the uncomfortable conversations, but the necessary ones, what's at stake is that culture that you've created or the culture that you're allowing. because I don't know if anyone's ever joined any of our masterclasses before, but really remember this: the culture of your organization, it's shaped by the worst behavior that you're willing to tolerate. And that goes for, I believe, what you're willing to tolerate inside your organization, in your team, in the wider team and departments, and what is going on outside of that organization as well. So this is a really good opportunity for you to actually share with your team what is clearly affecting their humanity. So when you stay silent about those things that are clearly affecting how they feel, how they're showing up, you're sending a message about what matters to you and to your organization. And slowly, over time, that chips away at the culture that you're creating in your team and in your wider organization. So we're going to, now that we've kind of set the scene of that, today we're going to dive into a couple of different tools, questions, things you can think about, super simple stuff, not things that you need to have more resources, more money, more time for, but things that you can start to do to really demonstrate empathy in your workplace, but also build that as a key behavior within your team as well. So I'm going to tell you a little story just to set the scene even more, because I love a story. Anyone who's joined our free masterclass series before will know we always add in a couple of stories, a couple of case studies, just to really help bring some of this messaging home. So bear with me on this one, because I know it does sound like one of those moments that have been curated for LinkedIn or for a post or something like this. But this conversation genuinely happened last week. And I honestly believe that empathy as a behavior, as a trait, as a way in which we show up is often the missing link in so many conversations that are happening in our personal and in our professional lives. So before I go any further, I really want to just be clear about what I mean about empathy. So for me, empathy is about putting yourself in another person's shoes. It's about understanding their perspective and their feelings. It's not sympathy, that which for me is about feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is about truly understanding what someone else is experiencing, even when it's not something that we've experienced ourselves before. So here's the story. I was at a networking event last week, and someone told me that they weren't really into the whole, and I quote, feminist thing, because they'd never been discriminated against based on their gender. So for them, they don't get it. Now, this really took me by surprise, but I also was left feeling really curious. So I had loads of questions going around in my head, and we had this really productive conversation about what they meant. So, I asked questions like, in my brain, I was thinking, is this social conditioning? Is this a lack of empathy? I mean, there's so much that I haven't personally experienced in the world that I still care about and that I still would really like to see change in the world. So then I was thinking, how have we as individuals ended up so self-focused? Now, this isn't about naming and shaming. It honestly is about genuine curiosity. So I kept asking what they meant, how they felt, trying to understand more. Because I honestly believe when we have conversations, uncomfortable conversations with people that disagree with us on some things, that's where real growth happens. That's where real opportunity comes from. And I think it's that level of critical thinking and curiosity that we need more of in the workplace, as well as in our communities. So I really wanted to understand more. And they described to me that they didn't have this gut feeling about sexism because they'd never experienced it. So I asked them about racism, and well, no, they said, they hadn't experienced that either because they're a cis white woman. And so my question was, okay, but you empathize with another person's experience of that and their intersectionality, right? And they said, well, no, because if I've not personally experienced it, how can I? And so for me in this conversation, what I realized was that empathy is often the missing piece when we think about what is happening in the world right now, the challenges that different groups are experiencing, and how we better support people in our communities and in our workplace. So my point is, how do we spend more time as leaders and as contributors developing empathy and building more resilient communities, whether that's within our workplace, within our team, or in other things that we get involved in? Because I don't think we need lived experience of everything to show up for other people. Instead, I think where we need to spend our time as leaders and managers is developing and really investing in our own learning around self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and compassion. We need to do the work so that we can demonstrate understanding and empathy, not just for ourselves, but for all of the people around us. So that for me is the empathy gap. That's what we're trying to fill through conversations, masterclasses, and things that we do in the programs that we develop for leaders and managers as well. Because here's the really cool thing. Empathy, this isn't about just being nice, because recent research from Stanford shows that empathy is a genuine workplace superpower. How cool is that? There's so much research on this. Please, please, please go away. Have a look at it. I've left some here on the slide around what McKinsey's done and some of the research that they've invested in. But Harvard Business Review, loads of other people have really looked at this concept of empathy and how we can better be showing up in our workplaces. So here's what some of the research says. So employees who believe their managers are empathetic, they call in sick less. They report less burnout and have better mental health overall. People who feel empathized with also innovate more, and they take more creative risks, which ultimately have a much bigger impact on the organization, on the team, on your impact in terms of the projects, the work that you're delivering, but also on the bottom line. So this is a financial benefit of being more empathetic. How cool is that? Now, the really good news that I get excited about, because obviously I run a learning and development company, is that empathy is not a fixed trait. This is absolutely a skill and a behavior that we can all build. And that, for me, is the most exciting part about this. If we can really invest the time and energy in developing and building this skill, it will have a massive impact on our professional lives, but also on our personal lives as well. So now I'm going to get into some of the practical stuff that you can literally do today or tomorrow with your team and for yourself as well, and for the people around you in other parts of the work that you might be doing. I honestly think this is probably one of the most powerful questions that you as a leader or a manager can ever ask your team. So the most powerful question, I believe, is, what do you need from me right now? Then all you need to do is stay quiet and really listen to what your team is telling you. Don't jump to any solutions. Don't try to fix everything. Just really listen and understand what the people in your team are actually needing from you right now as their leader. Sounds so simple, right? But when was the last time you asked your team this question? Because I even know for myself, even though we talk about this stuff all the time, when we're full of busy, when there's lots going on, when we're overwhelmed, when our diaries are packed and we're in back-to-back meetings, are we always genuinely creating space for that connection time with your team and asking these questions? Because hands up, I'm not always doing that, right? And I'm always really honest on these masterclasses, because this isn't about me saying this is the only way to do things, but I've genuinely seen the more connection we have, the more we ask these simple questions, the better we build relationships with our team, the better that team member feel seen and heard by you, and all of the great results that you're looking for, they come from that. We've seen it time and time again with the thousands of leaders and managers that we've worked with. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes just going through some of the practical tools that I think will help you do this. But if you just remember one thing from this whole masterclass, it's this question: what do you need from me right now? At any point in time, that goes straight to the issue, the challenge, the experience that your team member might be having right now. Okay, so the practical stuff. I've got 5 of them. I love 3s and I love 5s when I'm sharing this stuff, always have done. So we've got 5 ways for you as a leader and manager to build empathy and start using your voice when it really matters, which is right now. The world is a little bit upside down and your team are looking for you for support. So first of all, sounds really obvious, but ask better questions. Don't just ask your team, how are you? Because we all know the answer to the question, how are you, is fine, even when it's not. Instead, ask, how are you really doing? Ask, what's on your mind right now? Ask, how is everything that's happening in the world affecting you? Then actually listen, because you may need to ask these things a few times actually before people start opening up and before you're able to get to the truth of how someone is feeling. And research shows that when people feel connected to their colleagues, to their leaders, they work harder, they work faster, and they work more creatively. Who doesn't want more of that in their team right now? Now, the second part, and this may feel uncomfortable when you first start to do it, especially if it's not something you're used to doing either with your team or with other people, but be vulnerable first. Leaders set the culture of their teams. That is fact. People are looking to you to see what is deemed normal behavior in their organization, in their team. And if you want your team to be open about how they're feeling, you really need to model that behavior first. So, this isn't about oversharing. I truly believe that vulnerability has to have boundaries, but, maybe share how you're processing some of what's happening in the world right now. It's okay to admit that you don't have all the answers, but if you really want empathy in your team, better relationships, better communication, better ways of working, you need to model it first. It really is as simple as that. So really think about how you can start these conversations with your team and get really honest about maybe what you're seeing in the world right now and how that is having an impact on you. It's a really good starting point. So the third part, and this relates quite nicely back to the story that I told you before about getting curious rather than jumping to conclusions. So when someone might be acting out in your team or behaving differently, often that person is in some form of pain. So, for example, someone might seem bored when they're actually just quite anxious, or someone might be having outbursts or appear angry when actually they're really sad. Or it could be that someone in your team seems a little bit disengaged right now, when actually what's going on for them is that they're overwhelmed with the amount of work that they've got. So they've disengaged from the experience really to protect themselves from that overwhelm. So instead, as leaders and managers, rather than reacting to that behavior, the really important thing to do here is get curious about what might be going on underneath that behavior, because curiosity, honestly, it beats making assumptions every single time. In fact, that example I gave you of the networking event, if I hadn't have been curious in that conversation, if I jumped to conclusions or made assumptions that that person didn't have empathy or didn't understand some of the stuff that's going on in the world right now, we would have had a really different conversation. Now, instead, we had this really great conversation about what was going on for them, how they felt, getting curious about them as an individual, their viewpoint, and what is going on for them in the world right now. And it just completely changed the dynamic. And actually, we had a really great conversation off the back of it. So the fourth thing is make time for connection with your team. I know what you're going to say. You don't have time. You're busy. You've got targets to hit, meetings to attend, calls to take, all of that stuff. But I think it might just be the most efficient use of your time, because when people feel connected and supported, they actually work more efficiently. Your team will be more creative, more collaborative, and more resilient. So, in the long term, I actually think you'll be saving yourself time by carving out that space for connection with your team to really understand what's going on for them. Now, I hear a lot from the managers and leaders that we work with and from their teams that one-to-ones aren't happening enough. And let me just get some water, sorry. Talking so much. One-to-ones just aren't happening. You know, the one thing that I see consistently across every sector, industry, level of leaders and managers, one-to-ones are rarely happening consistently. And what that means is you're having much less connection time with your team. And that has a huge, huge impact. So carve out that time. If you take one thing from this masterclass, please go away and make sure that you've got those consistent checkpoints in the diary with your team. And if you haven't, go ahead and set one up this week. Speak to your team, find out what's going on for them, and make sure they know that you're there for them. It has such a big impact. So simple, but so impactful. And finally, my fifth thing on the list is about practicing self-compassion. Because to be there for other people in your team as a leader and manager, you've got to be there for yourself first. It's that expression, isn't it? And I'm terrible at getting expressions wrong, so bear with me. But you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So you've got to treat yourself with the same care that you'd show a loved one. You know, you need to really think about how you can give permission to yourself to not have all of the answers when we're in these kind of more challenging times, politically, economically, and with the various crises that are going on around the world, like we're seeing in Gaza, in the Sudan, in Afghanistan, in the Ukraine. And, you know, when we give ourselves that permission to not have all the answers, while still showing up with empathy and support for our team, that's what you have to do, right? This isn't about being perfect. In fact, I think that trying to be perfect in what we say and how we do things can actually stop you from showing up and having the conversations that you need to be having with your team. So you're probably thinking, and we get this a lot, all of this is all well and good, right? We can do these steps, but how do we actually start the conversation with our team when it is something that feels a bit more uncomfortable, or you feel maybe out of your depth, like you don't have the answers, you don't have the right words to say? Because sometimes it's that paralysis that stops us from being able to have these conversations. So I've got a couple of just really simple little scripts that you can use to actually start these conversations. Now, if you want access to these, they're just little mini scripts. I'll talk through them now. Please drop me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message or on Instagram, or I'll put our socials at the end of this. And I'll send you these little scripts to help you start the conversation. Because I'm really passionate about empowering more people to feel comfortable having these conversations with their team. So one example could be, you could say something like, I know there's a lot happening in the world right now. How is it affecting you? And what do you need from me as your manager? Really simple questions, but a really nice opening. You're acknowledging what's happening in the world. You're wanting to understand what's happening for them and how you can best support them. Another version could be that you say something like, you've noticed that the team seems a bit different lately. And, what's on everyone's mind and how can we better support each other? So that's really about thinking about, as a whole team, how can we better show up for each other? How can we better navigate challenging times together? Third one could be just being really open about how you're feeling. So you could say something like, I don't have all the answers about what's happening globally, but I do want you to know that I'm here if you need to talk about how any of what you're seeing online, what you're hearing online, what you're experiencing in your own community, about how it's affecting you. I'm here, and I'm very, very happy to listen and to talk that through with you. It's keeping it simple, right? Keeping it human, keeping it real. You don't need all the answers, but your team does need to know that you're available to them and that you will create that space for uncomfortable, maybe tricky conversations, even when it feels hard, even when it feels uncomfortable to you and you don't know all the answers and you may have different views to people in your team. It's about creating space for that conversation so that everyone feels seen, supported by you as their manager and leader. So I'm just going to wrap up today's masterclass. Can you believe it's over already? I hope you've enjoyed being with us today. I know there's been a couple of things we've talked about. Please watch it back on replay if you want to, so that we can just can recap on some of it. But if you do remember one thing, I just want you to remember that progress with uncomfortable conversations in the workplace or in our communities or even in our personal lives, it is messy and it is imperfect and it's very human for that to be the case. So your team, they genuinely don't need you to have all the answers. They don't need you to fix the world. But what they do need from you is your humanity more than your perfection. They need to know you see them, you care about them, and you're willing to have the conversations that matter, even when it is uncomfortable to do so. So I honestly believe that the leaders who do speak up, even when they don't have the perfect plan of what to say, or they don't know exactly what they do want to say, those people make a much bigger difference than those that are stuck in perfection paralysis. People really underestimate how empathetic their colleagues actually are. Everyone is way more empathetic than we think. We all just need more permission to show that in the workplace and to be a bit more vulnerable. So I honestly believe that there is no time to be silent. Your team, your customers, your suppliers, and your community around you are looking at you. So please, please put in the energy, the time, the love, and the empathy, and the results will genuinely follow. So thank you so, so much for joining me today. I'd love to hear about your experience with any empathy gaps in leadership. So do reach out if you've got any questions. And thank you again for joining us. We'll be back in October with another masterclass. But in the meantime, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. And if you'd love a bit more information, a bit more insights, you can join our mailing list, which has a newsletter that goes out that's all about human skills, leadership, and culture transformation in our workplaces. But have a really good day. Take care.